Tonight, Jess Phillips, the Safeguarding Minister, angrily hits back at tech billionaire Elon Musk. The owner of X posted messages calling for her to be jailed and labelled her a rape genocide apologist. She tells us it's been painful watching the issue of child exploitation become a political football.
Crack on with this, getting to Mars. I have no... Elon Musk is going to Elon Musk. I've got bigger and more important things to be thinking about.
Also tonight, Donald Trump declares himself NATO's saviour and says members should spend 5% of GDP on defence. Plus, UK long-term borrowing costs hit their highest level since 1998. We'll ask how worried the Chancellor Rachel Reeves should be. And as the daughter of Spice Girl Mel B talks about how difficult celebrity kids have it, we're going to be talking political Nepo babies. Bringing the girl power to the studio tonight, Dawn Butler and Daisy McAndrew, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Tuesday, I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Now, this week, the grooming and rape scandal crashed into the news. Politicians on both sides of the Atlantic started talking about it, and the government has committed to implementing all of the recommendations of the J report. Which begs the question, why has everyone suddenly started talking about this? You know, what's changed in the last 2 weeks? I've heard a lot of people giving the answer that nothing's changed. You know, we've done the inquiry, we've had the debate on this, nothing's changed since the J inquiry reported back in 2022. I don't actually think that's true. You know, the reason this story is blown up is because court documents started circulating online, specifically about Mohammed Karar, part of the Oxford grooming gang, who was given a whole life sentence in 2013. Now, when I read those court documents online, I felt physically sick. You know, I couldn't actually get the details out of my head. And I know about the case of Mohammed Karar, I remember it really well. But the details of what he did are very hard to shake. And that shows the power of social media. But the story's also, I guess, shown the pitfalls. On the show tonight, we'll hear from Jess Phillips, speaking to my colleague Beth Rigby, a woman who spent her life campaigning for victims of abuse, called a rape genocide apologist by Elon Musk, and getting threats to her safety as a result. It just shows, I guess, that with power also comes responsibility. We can discuss that a little bit more with Beth, who is here with me now. We'll hear Beth's interview with Jess Phillips in a moment. But this is the first time she's really spoken out, isn't it?
Yeah, we did actually a very long interview, and we're going to see part of it tonight. We've actually done an hour-long interview, which we're going to run on our podcast on Thursday, where we go into a lot of detail both about Jess Phillips and the personal abuse she's received and the fallout for that, when she talks about the threats she's faced because of Elon Musk's remarks and the avalanche of abuse that she faced after that. But we also talk about the substance of some of these claims that are being made about cover-ups, about the government not dealing with grooming gangs. We talk about why she doesn't think now is the time for a national inquiry. She tells me about a victims panel going into the Home Office. She wants to convene council leaders. And she talks about, you talked in your intro about why now. She talks about that case in the longer interview about the Oldham Council asking for a government-led review, and she explains why she wants a local review and she wants them all across the country. And she says, absolutely, child sexual exploitation is endemic in this country. It's happening all across the country. And she talks very passionately about her life's work, trying to actually tackle this, and also her anger and frustration and pain, as she puts it, at the way in which she is being characterised as someone that is covering this stuff up, not campaigning for it.
You say there about how she talks about her pain. How did she feel in the interview? How did she come across? Did she seem, upset, flustered?
She was angry.
Angry. Yeah.
She was angry. And actually, in the longer interview that comes out on Thursday, she said that her biggest fear is that some of the women and young girls and boys that have come to her, who have been the victims of grooming and sexual violence and abuse, she's worried that this online narrative that is being set about her might make victims feel that maybe she's not someone that they can go to. And she actually said that was her biggest fear. But she was angry, and she was angry at the Musk comments, but she's also angry at other politicians that she says, as Keir Starmer says, has jumped on the bandwagon. I did put to her the comments that Robert Jenrick had made and Kemi Badenoch had made about time to stitch this stuff together, and she was very robust in her response, and also very defensive of a Prime Minister that she argues was the one that really tried to change the culture around this when he was Director of Public Prosecutions. And, you know, whatever you feel about Jess Phillips, I think you and I can both agree there's not really many politician that you could come across that knows more about this subject than Jess Phillips, who campaigned against domestic abuse when she was not an MP and has become the Safeguarding Minister and dedicated her political life to this.
Yeah, thanks very much, Beth. Let's listen to your interview now.
Jess, thanks for coming to talk to us today. Now, an awful lot has been said about you and written about you in the past few days. This is the first time you've come to speak for yourself. What would you like to say?
I suppose the thing that my strongest feeling is that there is a huge furore about something a man thousands of miles away said about me that has led to an issue that I care so deeply about and have dedicated most of my working life and quite a lot of my personal life to making better and supporting victims, specifically of grooming gangs, really, really directly. And it's painful to watch it become a political football rather than an actual attempt to really do something. You get very, very tired when you do this kind of work, and I've sat in courtrooms with young girls because they'll only speak if I'm sat there holding their hand. I've literally had a young woman groomed and raped, and she was pregnant, miscarry to the point where it marked my shoes because I was in the room with her and taking her to hospital while that was happening. And none of their voices, no care was given about these women. And this sudden demands being made, whether it's by the Conservative Party or ridiculous statements that are false being made about me and my government about it by a man 1,000 miles away, it's just really, really, really painful when you know what I know, when you've seen what I've seen, and those young women deserve considerably better.
The man you're talking about is Elon Musk. I imagine you don't want to spend much time with me dwelling on him.
No.
He spends a lot of time. You're living rent-free in his head, it seems, at the moment.
Yeah.
But he called you a rape genocide apologist. You were talking about how it felt painful. Were you angry about that?
I mean, at first I just thought it was ridiculous. It's a ridiculous statement. I don't even know what it means, but it's a ridiculous statement. It's completely and utterly untrue. And whilst, to use your words, that I'm living rent-free in his head, he obviously hasn't looked into the level of work that I have done on this over the years or currently. So it's not, I've had men say worse things about me over the years, but what it makes me feel, when, in the cold light of day, after you've sort of dealt with how ridiculous it is and then the effect it's going to have on whether it's the next week of your life or how much of your life, you go back to, you can't be silenced by these people because you've got a job to do. and you've got a job, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that you've been given in government to actually change things for child abuse victims. And so then I just have to, you know, stop my feelings on the matter and stop worrying about, you know, what I feel about it and just try and crack on with my job.
But what is the effect?
Oh, the effect is it's one of like being in a cloud and literally being able to see the wood for the trees, and the level of volume of communication that you get, both good and bad, it is suddenly huge. This is a man with a global platform. My sister-in-law texts me. She lives in my brother lives in France. And my sister-in-law texted me and said, I've just been reading about you in Le Monde. And so there is a level of ridiculousness of the bandwidth that this can make. So I have to think then, you never waste a crisis. That's what I was raised. I actually, funnily enough, wrote a book about one of the whistleblowers in Rochdale, where the lesson is never waste a crisis, that I'm trying to teach other people. And I won't waste this one, and I will make it so that we get change in our country.
I'm going to come on to that, but just before I do, the effect was that you've had threats made against you.
Oh, yeah.
You've been subject to abuse for many, many years.
Many years.
We've talked about it before, that you're one of the top 10 MPs in terms of needing protection. Was this on another scale that you haven't seen before?
Yes, I think. I mean, it's hard to sort of quantify it compared with other sort of times that you've been under particular threat. But risk is dynamic, and you have to take the information that you have in front of you and react to it as if the sort of highest level of risk. And so yeah, it changes my life every single time. Every single time any of these sorts of things happen, it withdraws you a little bit more from the public. It takes you away from the public who need your help.
But the point is, what he did was dangerous. It's dangerous to your safety.
Yeah, I mean, I think Keir said it yesterday, that when you speak and if you have misinformation, you have to think about the consequences of what that does, and one of those consequences is a risk to members of Parliament that you are talking about. And that, as Keir said as well, I'm all here for robust debate. In fact, Beth, I'm not that keen on people being overly nice to me. I like a bit of a brawl. But there is a difference between targeting misinformation at somebody and then just letting whatever threat to them roll out and robust debate.
The Conservatives are calling for a national public inquiry into grooming gangs, arguing that while trials have taken place all over the country, no one in authority has joined the dots. Badenoch saying 2025 must be the year that victims start to get justice. What's your response to that?
My response is that it's amazing that Kemi Badenoch could say 2025 should be the year that victims get the response after 14 years of government. I'm not entirely sure. Funnily enough, this all started about an Oldham inquiry, which a government she was part of also said should be done locally. And the fact that Kemi Badenoch is reacting to something that Elon Musk has said, I am reacting to things that victims say to me. And I watched what happened in the Telford inquiry because I was there. I helped and supported the victims throughout that inquiry. And it is the best thing I have ever seen to actually inform change of how things happen now, that stops children being abused now. So the Tories it's amazing they were only out of government 6 months ago, and now they're claiming that. I've never seen Kemi Badenoch, Chris Philp, Robert Jenrick in any of the meetings that I've been in over the years trying to advance policy on this. Never once.
But do you think there should be a public inquiry in the sense that, yes, the J review looked at child exploitation
It did for 2 years.
For 2 years, but specifically on grooming gangs, whether or not this is an area that needs its own inquiry?
Look,
that's the argument. How do you...
Their argument, what does that inquiry even look like? I am in no way against the full truth of everything that has ever happened, and also accountability for people who covered things up, which is one of the reasons that we are pushing on mandatory reporting so that people can be sent to prison if they try and cover this stuff up. And look, I am in no way against whatever will make that happen. But where is the evidence that this flag waving, that these Johnny-come-latelys, because Elon Musk said something, where is the evidence when we had a national inquiry and still 2 years of their government, nothing changed? So after Sarah Everard died, the only thing the government announced at that time, when there's this big furore about women's safety, was that they would do the Angelini inquiry, which is still ongoing. Not a single thing has changed for women on the ground. I am interested in changing things.
You really angry?
I am really, really, really angry. I am really, really angry because some of the people who are now claiming to be the virtuous flag bearers of these victims, well, I'm going to listen to the victims and I won't rule out anything. We are making a specific, and this was always the plan, you know, the only thing I would say that this furore has done is elevate the announcement. There was always the plan that we would have a group of victims that would sit within the Home Office as decision makers on the child sex abuse inquiry and how to make it happen.
A final question, Jess. Elon Musk has said a lot about you. Is there anything you would want to say to him?
Just, you know, crack on with us getting to Mars. I have no... Elon Musk is going to Elon Musk. I've got bigger and more important things to be thinking about.
We can watch that full interview with Beth Rigby on the Electoral Dysfunction podcast, which is out later this week. Right, let's bring in our duo for the evening, shall we? The Labour MP, Dawn Butler, and the journalist and broadcaster, Daisy McAndrew. Great to have you both here. I think it's really important, as we've been saying on the Politics Hall this week, that you can kind of hold two things in your head at once, that, you know, there hasn't been accountability over the grooming gang scandal, but also that there has been a weaponisation and there's been these attacks on people like Jess Phillips. Both of these things can be true at the same time. What was your reaction, Daisy, listening to that?
I mean, I, of course, feel very sorry for Jess Phillips on a human scale. Anybody who's been following her career for the last 20, 30 years knows full right, just as you and Beth are both saying, this is a woman that, you know, this issue runs, you know, in her blood and she cares passionately. So she was completely the wrong target for Elon Musk to be attacking. And I think it has certainly diminished him and it's angered Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron and all sorts of other European politicians who are up in arms about Musk. But of course, you're absolutely right. There are still questions to be asked. And the sadness to me is that she's right. I think Jess Phillips is right. This issue is now being turned into a political football. It's a cliche, but it's true as well. And it's too serious of an issue to be a political football. And there are still questions about why these kids weren't protected, why this particular community of criminal men felt that they could get away with it. You know, is it still happening? And I was listening to Andrew Norfolk, who is the original Times journalist who covered this story and, you know, has worked on it for decades and decades. And he's furious about Elon Musk, but he is still saying there are questions. So why did these men attack these women? Why these men from this particular community? These are the difficult questions that haven't been answered. He also did say that he thought that David Cameron, Michael Gove and Keir Starmer had all done very good things on this issue. He came to Keir, this was this evening, he came to Keir Starmer's defence, saying when he was the DPP, he had changed things and he had done good things for the victims. So, I mean, Elon Musk, I think, back in your box.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think giving Musk way too much oxygen, number one, and I think for somebody to have put the life of a government minister at risk in this way is very dangerous and extremely irresponsible. And I feel that when people talk about you can't talk about protecting women and girls if you then are going to allow somebody to put somebody's life at risk in this way. And I think, you know, Jess has a right to be extremely angry about this. And I think for all the victims and survivors of grooming to see their pain exploited in this way is absolutely shameful. Our priority must be to ensure that any perpetrator who has committed a sexual offence in this way is found and locked up and reported, stopped from happening again. And all of the victims are survivors, of which there are many. The report talked about 500,000 children a year are abused, that we make sure that they are well cared for and well looked after. At the moment, if we use it like a political football, as it's happening at the moment, we are ignoring and sidelining the very people we should be protecting. And I think that, you know, people should be absolutely ashamed of themselves to how they are using this situation. And the Conservative Party has had 14 years. 14 years, and all of a sudden now it means a lot. All of a sudden now it has to be tackled.
Well, that is a bit unfair. Alexis Jay, who wrote the recent report in 2022, obviously she is saying she wants the recommendations to be brought forward. The Conservative government did seem to be on track to that. Then they held an unexpected election and that put an end to that. So it's not as if they did nothing. They did have the report.
Recommendations, just 20. You know, there's some reports where there are hundreds. There were just 20 recommendations. 0 were implemented by the government. 0.
But surely they could have been implemented in the last few months.
But so hang on. So 14 years of a Tory government.
No, but the 2022 report is not 14 years, it's 2 years since the 2022 report.
Right, and 0 were implemented. So in 6 months, Labour has looked at this. You know, Yvette Cooper said what she's going to do in 6 months. Remember, we only had 6 months.
The political row is going to continue, clearly. And Dawn, I take your point about the oxygen for Elon Musk. You know, every time he posts something on X, it headlines the news, and, you know, we may as well just pack our bags and go home.
And
but at the same
can
time...
I just say, it's also ridiculous that what we have to tackle, and this is another thing which I think is a priority, we need to tackle social media and disinformation and misinformation. We need to make sure we educate young people in regards to how they look at information online and how they protect themselves. We haven't even started to do that in this country.
It's a very, very fair point. At the same time, it feels to me like this week has really shown, I guess, what the reality of the next 3-4 years could be like in the United States. And with the, you know, constant attacks from Elon Musk, who obviously has a role in the Trump administration.
And is obsessed with the Labour Party.
And is obsessed with the Labour Party and Keir Starmer. I mean, that's going to be quite hard for them to deal with.
Well, we've had these two issues. His obsession with the Labour Party, which seems to me to go all the way back to this court case that we won't get back into, with a former Labour Party staffer that has made him obsessed with the Labour Party. And also his seemingly obsessive, affection for Reform, the party, and we all thought he was going to give money. We've been over this in the last week, but I've just been reflecting today, now that he seems to have done a U-turn on Nigel Farage, him seemingly very pro, now not so pro, but he's also, I think, in the eyes of the public, Elon Musk, I think he's fallen, you know, in people's... If people ever did admire him, I think he's lost a lot of that. I think he's made himself look very stupid this week. So I do think that potentially gives Nigel Farage an opportunity to distance himself from Elon Musk. And I think politically, you know, with my political journalist hat on, that's going to be interesting. Could this be an opportunity for Nigel Farage to say, do you know what? And I know he did say in the last few days, friends can disagree. But I think maybe Elon Musk has gone too far with these attacks, and that actually Farage could do himself some good by saying, yeah, actually, I think Musk is probably not somebody I want to be in bed with after all these sort of quite nutty comments.
And I think the other thing is that Musk is going to have an official government position in America. So he's going to be a representative of President Trump. And there needs to be a professionalism to how the communication happens between our two countries. And that's going to be interesting to how that happens.
Yeah.
Also, I've been thinking really hard. I've been thinking about Peter Mandelson the last 24 hours as well, thinking, how on earth is he going to deal with this, you know, Anglo-American situation?
The new ambassador to the US, who's got his work cut out.
He really has.
He's been thinking, oh my goodness me. Thanks both very much indeed. Well, let's continue talking about the United States, shall we? Because Donald Trump has given what you might call a wide-ranging news conference today, talking about the Middle East, the war in Ukraine, the Panama Canal, to name just a few things. But his comments about defence spending among NATO countries could have a real impact on the debate here in the UK.
Well, I think NATO should have 5%, yeah. Well, you can't do it at 2%. I mean, at 2%, every country, if you're going to have a country in a regular military, you're at 4%. I think they should be, you know, they're in dangerous territory. I think it should be, they can all afford it, but they should be at 5%, not 2%.
Our correspondent David Blevins joins us now from Washington. 5%, that's going to go down not very well among many NATO countries, including, I'm sure, the UK.
Yes, doubling down hard on that demand. Of course, it's not the first time Donald Trump has suggested this amount, but it is the first time he has suggested it on camera, Sophie. So that is significant. He's calling on European countries to pay their bills, to increase their contribution to 5% of their GDP in order to retain the protection of NATO. Of course, it was, as you say, a wide-ranging press conference. He also ruled out the use of military or economic coercion in his pursuit of Greenland, which he said America needs to take control of for national security reasons, and in his pursuit of the Panama Canal. In fact, he was highly critical of former President Jimmy Carter's handling of the Panama Canal issue, which was unfortunate in terms of the timing, because the cortege of the 39th President of the United States was making its way from Atlanta, Georgia to Washington, D.C. ahead of the state funeral this week as the President-elect was making those comments. The other issues, of course, that he also dealt with today related to the Middle East. And when you consider the war in Gaza, the fragile peace in Lebanon and the instability in Syria, it's quite remarkable that he chose to suggest that if Israeli hostages are not returned, are not back home by the time of the inauguration, which is now just 2 weeks away, all hell will break out. Very threatening and dangerous language indeed, it would seem. I think it is important to say that some people might just say this is vintage Trump, speaking off the cuff in a very wide-ranging, often seemingly rambling press conference at times. But something does feel a bit different this time. I think there is a resignation here in Washington that he didn't just win the election, but won it handsomely. And whether this might have been written off as a negotiating tactic in the past, people now recognise that they really have to take these sorts of comments at face value.
OK, David, thank you very much. David Blevins there for us in Washington. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, I'll be getting a reaction to that call on defence spending from Robbie Moore for the Conservatives. I'll also, of course, speak to him about his party's call for a national inquiry into the grooming scandal.
Paris reverberated to the sights, sounds and smells of conflict.
There's a focal point to all this anger, and that is Emmanuel Macron.
I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels.
There are dozens of people desperately clambering to get onto that boat. It is a chaotic scene, but it's being watched by dozens of French police officers on the beach.
I've reported on migration across Europe, close up on the ground, understanding that sense of desperation and meeting the criminal gangs behind it.
This old fishing boat set off from the Libyan port of Tobruk. There were 606 people who were on board.
So we've been distributing life jackets to all the people on board this boat, and now the first person is coming on board.
This is the ugly side of Italian football.
In Italy, everything is really organized.
Football's problems with hooliganism, racism were just dormant, and now they're back and they're getting worse.
We cover so many countries, languages and cultures and work hard to gain trust to bring you the full story first.
Help is slowly reaching these places.
It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble and dust.
This is a picture of destruction.
Everywhere you look in this mountaintop community, there is absolute devastation.
These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again. Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
A police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. We can speak now to the Conservatives. Robbie Moore, the Shadow Frontbencher, joins us live from Parliament's central lobby. Thank you very much for being with us. So you're pushing to see this public inquiry into grooming gangs. Let's explain the thinking.
Well, look, I, since getting elected in 2019, have been calling for a gang rape inquiry looking specifically at child sexual exploitation across the Bradford district. This issue is something that has haunted my constituency and the wider Bradford district for a significantly long period of time. And that is exactly why I have not stopped campaigning on this issue since getting elected back in 2019. Quite rightly, I think the leader of the opposition, Kemi, has called for a national inquiry looking at this issue. And I would very much welcome that, as providing that there is this specific focus across the Bradford district, which I've been calling for a significant long period of time.
Can I just pick you up on this? Because you are right. You know, you have been calling for an inquiry ever since you were elected. That's completely right. But what you have been calling for seems to be a local inquiry rather than a national inquiry, a Rotherham-style inquiry, in your words. And that's what, you know... Now you're saying it has to be a public national inquiry, which is what the Labour government don't want to do. So why does it have to be a public inquiry only when the Labour government are in power and a local one's fine once the Conservatives are in power?
Well, look, all I want to see is justice being brought to the victims across the area that I represent.
But genuinely, there's a reason I'm asking for this, because this is the whole crux of this debate, that people are saying because Jess Phillips told Oldham they should just look at it on a local level, they should do it rather than a national public inquiry. That's what you wanted when the Conservatives were in power. So it feels an important distinction to make.
But the very point here is, when you are faced with local leaders like I have across the Bradford district, who are not willing to give the public that request, and you have a West Yorkshire mayor who is in charge of policing across the West Yorkshire district, not willing to give the public that desire, those victims, that desire of a national inquiry, the government should step in, which is exactly why...
I'm genuinely really confused as to why it was fine for it to be a local inquiry when the Conservatives are in power, but not when Labour are in power.
Well, when you are getting concerns that are raised around approximately 50 different towns, cities that are being impacted by the complexities of child sexual exploitation in different environments, different settlements across the UK, it probably is right that we have that national inquiry. I've been advocating for it at a local level, specifically across the Bradford district consistently for a number of years. But when you've got similar sort of concerns that are being raised in other towns, other cities, rather than having this hodgepodge approach that seems to be that we're having at the moment, a national inquiry that's specifically focusing on gang-related grooming is definitely the right approach. But what I'd advocate as part of that is that there is specific attention that is given to the likes of those areas where concern has been raised on consecutive occasions, like the Bradford district and like other areas across the UK where those challenges have been raised.
I absolutely understand the argument that some people say that, look, this has got to be done on a national scale, that the J report was too wide-ranging, it needs to be specific on grooming. But you can see why some people looking at this might be thinking that the Conservatives are using this as a political football, that they didn't call for this, you know, when the Conservatives were in power, and they've changed their tune now that it's Labour.
Well, look, I have been very clear in saying over a number of years, and most recently, that the British state has failed victims of child sexual exploitation consistently for far, far too long. And whether, regardless of political power nationally and regardless of political power at a local level, you know, I have been advocating for having that local inquiry consistently since getting elected, and unfortunately, we haven't achieved that yet. I'm pleased that there is so much national focus on this issue right now, but incredibly frustrated frustrated that despite me having been raising this issue since getting elected, that we have not yet achieved that for my constituents, and indeed for actually the other towns and cities that have been calling for this but not yet achieved it yet. So regardless of political makeup at a national level or indeed at a local authority level, it's time to just put all of the political differences aside and do what is right, as I have been advocating for those survivors consistently for a number of years, and have that national inquiry that then will, in my view, lead to convictions that need to take place, that provide the right level of justice to those survivors, those victims and those families, holds those to account that have not been robust enough in calling this issue out for what it is, potentially covering up, sweeping this issue under the carpet for far too long, and that we can provide reassurance to those victims in the state, in those safeguarding organisations, in local authorities, that they feel that they have been disenfranchised by for far too long.
I think it's, the points you make about the accountability and the justice for the victims are really important. I did want to ask you about the Elon Musk comments towards Jess Phillips and the abuse that has generated for her. She's had to report things to the police. We've heard her talking to Beth about it today. And I know that this is something that you obviously have experienced as well. Last year, you had threats made against yourself. You talked about how, abuse against MPs shouldn't be the norm. So would you take this opportunity to condemn Elon Musk for the comments that he made about Jess Phillips, calling her a rape genocide apologist, that have led to threats against her?
Well, look, those comments were completely, absolutely inappropriate, and I condemn any of those sorts of comments that leads to the harassment that likes of Jess Phillips and other ministers have experienced over the years. I remember even myself having armed police in my house where I live in the constituency at 3 o'clock in the morning after facing threats only a few months ago. So I've experienced it as well, and and we should not be having that level of rhetoric that is put out by the likes of Elon Musk. But what I do absolutely want to point out is when it comes to making professional decisions as a minister, I do think that Jess Phillips, as our Safeguarding Minister, got the decision-making completely wrong in not giving Oldham what it was requesting for in terms of having government assistance in having that inquiry across Oldham. And that is, we've seen Oldham in a position of asking the government for that, and the government have passed the buck back down to the local authority. If you take Bradford district, where I am, the local authority don't even want a local inquiry, and yet the government have not even enacted on what I've been asking for to have that local inquiry put on the local authority. So the only way that we can deal with this issue, when you've got lots of different towns, cities asking for these issues and this and justice to be delivered for the local victims, survivors, is to have the government to step in and have a national inquiry that specifically focuses on those towns like the Bradford district, like Keighley, that I've been advocating for a number of years now.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Good to have you on the programme this evening. Coming up next on The Politics Hub, is the Chancellor heading for a new budget headache as the cost of government borrowing hits a quarter-century high? Hello, welcome back. You're watching The Politics Hub. Well, Rachel Reeves, this woman there, could be in trouble on public spending after the UK government's long-term cost of borrowing rose to the highest levels since 1998. Well, our deputy political editor, Sam Coates, is here to explain why. Sam, what's going on?
Right, Sophie, did Rachel Reeves sail too close to the wind in the budget, and are the markets punishing her for that? Right, look at this. What you're looking at here is the cost of government borrowing. The higher the cost, the more debt interest has to be paid by government. And that's money that could be going on schools and hospitals, and it's changing by the minute. In fact, you can see it today, and it's going in the wrong direction. As of today, that figure is at a 27-year high. That's caused by lower growth and expectations that interest rates are going to stay higher for longer. But all of that adds up to make Rachel Reeves' life harder. And that's because she is so hemmed in. In her first budget, the Labour Chancellor set herself a hugely ambitious target, which is to have no borrowing at all to fund day-to-day government spending. And look, over the last 20 years, that's just not been achieved at all. All of this is above the 0% line. It just hasn't happened. And now it's forecast, the official projections back in October, forecast for it to happen in a few years' time. But only, look at this, by the narrowest of margins, £9.9 billion. That's the headroom that she's giving herself, the wiggle room against her self-imposed borrowing limits. But if you think that sounds like a lot of money, well, you've got to remember that total government spending is over £1 trillion a year, so it's only really a small amount. And on the back of that rising debt forecasts, the rising debt costs, analysts suggest that that headroom could today be as little as £1 billion. But the real verdict on the headroom that matters comes on March the 26th, when Rachel Reeves returns to the Commons for the spring statement. And that's when the Office for Budget Responsibility pronounces on how much wiggle room she's got. Now, inside the Treasury, they know that on that date, there is a real chance that the OBR rule that she has breached her limits and that they'll have to take action. Now, I understand that she's determined to stick to these tough borrowing limits. And inside the Treasury, they know that on that day, they cannot tax anymore. So there will only be one choice. If they do break their limits, Rachel Reeves is going to have to squeeze further growth in public spending yet further. That's going to be really hard. Let me give you some historical context for that. Look at the last 30 years of government spending reviews. That's normally when public spending goes up a fair old chunk. Look at the Blair years, the Brown years. It did drop during the coalition, but under Boris Johnson, it kind of went right back up again. Now look at what Rachel Reeves is planning to do in terms of increasing public spending. So here we have it. This year, big increase, 4.3%. Next year, moderate increase, 2.6%. But after that, she's already planning, really in historical terms, if you look at historical comparisons, relatively modest increases of 1.3%. How can you, if she's in trouble with her fiscal rules, can they scythe yet more money from these already wafer-thin increases without, for instance, and this is what advisors are telling me, breaking manifesto promises? Or maybe she can find money from the welfare budget. Look at this. The welfare budget is absolutely predicted to and forecast to explode. Look, you can see the line going up there. Now look at what that's made up of. And you can see the biggest chunk of that isn't children, isn't pensioners, but it's working age people. And for Labour in particular, reducing that, the amount of help that they give to people in work, will be hard and will cause a row. It's all difficult for Rachel Reeves. She's told us that she is the Iron Chancellor, but she's backed herself into something of a corner. It's getting more difficult. She blames the Tories, but then if there have to be further cuts or squeeze spending increases on public spending, will others be that forgiving?
Sam, thank you very much indeed. Well, of course, that story about borrowing, about the difficult choices that Rachel Reeves has to offer is sure to feature in tomorrow's papers. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the former Conservative Special Advisor Sam Ashar. Now, it's not that usual for Jeremy Corbyn and Nigel Farage to be united on a political issue, but that's the case today after England's cricket bosses rejected calls for a boycott of next month's match against Afghanistan. More than 160 MPs have urged the England and Wales Cricket Board to take action in protest against attacks on women's rights under the Taliban regime. Since the group's takeover in 2021, women in Afghanistan have been banned from taking part in organised sport. The letter was written by the Labour MP Tonya Antoniazzi, who confirmed to Sky News earlier that she'd met with the English and Wales Cricket Board earlier today.
One of the comments that was made to me is that political pressure has now given them a platform to be able to speak and to be able to do something in the public arena. That is what was really important. Having that political lever has given them that platform, and I hope that going forward we can work together and we can make things better.
Right, let's talk to Dawn and Daisy, shall we? Whenever you look at what's happening in Afghanistan when it comes to women's rights, it just breaks your heart. I guess what the cricket board would say is that sport should be non-political, it should rise above all of this. Dawn, what's your take?
I mean, sport's always been political. There's always been political statements in sport, and quite rightly so. Wherever you've got people and issues, it's a way to raise an issue. As you say, Sophie, what's happening in Afghanistan and to the women is heartbreaking, where they're not even allowed to speak. And I ran a surgery in my constituency in Brent when the Afghanistan crisis was at its peak. And there's lots of concerns. There's lots of things that my constituency wants, like they want some family reunion, like we had for Ukraine. They want that kind of to be implemented. So there's a lot that I think we can do. And I think anything that kind of raises the issues is important.
Daisy? I think it is very difficult, though, if you're asking one team, in this case the England cricket team, to take a stand. Because we've seen historically, if you're trying to make a change, then you really need lots of different countries to unite, and you need the overall global board to be behind those changes, in this case the ICC. And Afghanistan has broken the ICC's rules, so it seems to me that they shouldn't be in this tournament. It shouldn't be up to the English cricketers to make this sacrifice and not go to this game. It should be up to the ICC. And when you look at the most famous example of sport making a real difference in global politics was the anti-apartheid movement. But that was nations across the world, coming together and saying we will boycott South Africa until the South African government changes its policies on apartheid. And that was a very important cog in that wheel of pressure that was put on South Africa. And this just doesn't feel the same. I'm not saying that the cause isn't as important, it is, but you haven't got that global community of governments, politicians, sporting bodies coming together to make a stand. And I understand that Number 10 was asked about this afternoon, and they said the ICC, the International Cricket Confederation, needs to be the one to kick Afghanistan out rather than it being up to individual nations, and I agree with that.
Do you think that's right? Or?
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, to be honest. And they'll have to explain why they would or why they're not. I think what England's doing at the moment is they're not actually scheduling in any games with Afghanistan, so they're effectively, boycotting, which I think is the right thing to do. And I also feel that there needs to be consistency as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you say, it shouldn't be about on Ben Stokes or Joe Root, it should be on the body. And
exactly. When we've had this issue with Olympics or with World Cup, and we've
like
asked
Russia, for example,
Russia, Qatar, we've asked our sportsmen and women to sacrifice something that they've been working towards, and they have a finite number of years where they can practice their sport before they have to retire. And I think that's unfair. It shouldn't be up to individual sportsmen and women to make that sacrifice.
OK, thanks both very much indeed. Still to come on the Politics Hub. The daughter of Spice Girl Mel B says that so-called Nepo babies are being subjected to unprecedented hate. We're going to look at the long history of politicians with famous family connections.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8, we'll bring you all the latest on the weather, with hundreds of flood alerts and warnings still in place tonight. Plus, as the government announces a crackdown on sexually explicit deep fakes, we'll be hearing from Callie Jane Beach, the influencer and activist, about her experience. And we speak to the sister of one of 2 British hikers missing in the Italian Dolomite Mountains. All that and much more on the UK Tonight at 8.
Prime Minister Modi is the most popular politician in the country. He is expected to win his 3rd term in these elections.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party, a promise fulfilled. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. He paid over $50,000 to traffickers to get him to America. Instead, he was kidnapped, tied up and threatened by smugglers. A commando from the state force walks me through to a Maitai village on the front line.
Firing the civilian and they're burning our house.
We cross to the opposite side, held by the cookies.
When they fire, we have to retaliate.
Sky News, get the full story first. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. The enthusiasm is palpable. The young desire change. These elections are a pivotal moment for the country's economic and political history. The concern here is that the public healthcare system is inadequate. In a prayer, she's asking God to help understand what happened. I cannot carry on. God, help me. He says his world has crashed. Like him, there are scores of families searching for their loved ones. Too often have families endured such tragedies for the negligence not only by the administration, but also by spiritual people in this country. Free wherever you get your news. Even though it has few seats in Parliament, Kashmir is symbolic and very significant. It's often been called a nuclear flashpoint.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hello, now Phoenix Brown, the daughter of Spice Girl Mel B, has been speaking about her experience of being a so-called Nepo baby. Now, if you don't know what that is, then Nepo is short for nepotism. So it's basically used to refer to people accused of gaining success because of their family connections. Now, Mel B's daughter thinks that people like her have never faced so much hate from people resenting what they see as undeserved success. Well, ever since William Pitt the Younger, at least, politicians have not been immune from similar accusations, including in the current Parliament. So we thought we'd have a little look at some of the, I don't mean this in an offensive way, the Nepo babies of the 2024 Parliament, people who have followed in their parents' political footsteps. And there are a few famous faces there. Just to pick a couple out, we have got Hilary Benn, who of course comes from a very long line of family members who entered Parliament. I mean, the Benns, it's like, it's, this is political royalty, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So, of course, Tony Benn being his father. So, but as you said, the whole family. Yes.
Health Orator.
Yeah, the whole family, very, very. There he is.
There you go, Tony Benn. And
who gave up his seat in the House of Lords?
Yeah,
Tony Benn. So although he was, a left-wing firebrand, was from a very aristocratic family as well. So there's sort of two Nepo elements to that one.
I love it. I love it. The ultimate Nepo baby. Right, who else have we got here? We have got, that is Geoffrey Clifton Brown, who also has family members who sat in the Commons. His grandfather...
No, I don't know who his grandfather was.
I actually don't know either.
Mr. Clifton Brown.
Honest. I'm really sorry, guys. I'm just absolutely wrecking my political credibility.
Was he a law lord?
I've got no idea who that is, I'll be honest. But it is someone, it looks like someone in the Commons, maybe in the Lords.
That must be his grandfather.
Yeah, right? The grandfather, there we go. Right, let's have a look who else we got. Moving swiftly.
Did we not get told the answers?
Well, I'll be honest, the answers... Oh, no, hang on, wait, I've got it now. Douglas Clifton Brown, sorry. There we go.
OK.
Douglas Clifton Brown. That is, however, not Douglas
That is not. That is Nicholas Soames.
That is Nicholas Soames.
And we all know who his grandfather was.
Yeah, even I know that one.
Yeah. Churchill.
Very good. Winston Churchill.
He mentions it every now and again, I think.
Yeah, he does. He brings it up sometimes, right?
Not back when it comes forward on that one.
I mean, do you think it's something that we should be relaxed about? It's a good thing, or...?
I think it is a problem, but it's not. I don't think it's a problem of nepotism. I think it's a problem of advantage. I mean, for instance, I got my first job in the House of Commons when I dropped out of the London School of Economics, and I was able to take a job as an MP's researcher on £50 a week. And even in the 1990s, that was it was £10 a day I was being paid. And the only reason I could take that job was because my parents lived in London.
Yeah.
So I had that advantage that I could take a job that somebody, from a sort of, much more, less affluent background in the north could never have done because they couldn't have afforded rent in London. So I think there are advantages that many of us have that we don't realise, that we're putting other people out of a job by taking these cheap internships and so on. So,
and Parliament's actually made it a lot more difficult for MPs to have interns and volunteers because of the pass system. They've actually created a structure that has made it really difficult for even charities to use, the meeting rooms. But do I think it's too? I think, poor me, I've got no relatives in Parliament. I've had to do all the half graft myself.
Love it.
I think, poor me, that's what I think.
There we go. We're about to crash off air, but it's been great to talk to both of you. Lovely to have you both tonight. See you both again soon. And that is all from us tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at 7.